Have you ever noticed how the moment you show desperation, the room shifts? Not in your favor, not with empathy. It contracts. The very space that once felt open, maybe even full of opportunity, now recoils. People stop listening, not because they are cruel, but because desperation reeks of powerlessness, and powerlessness is not neutral, it is offensive. It demands something without leverage. It exposes need without command. The desperate man begs, even if silently. And Machiavelli knew this. When you beg, even with your eyes, you forfeit the one thing that makes others listen, respect. You don't lose it gradually, you lose it instantly, like a snapped string, because respect is not about how good you are, it is about how in control you appear to be. In a court full of whispers and eyes, where alliances shift with the wind, the man who stays quiet, who does not need, is watched. The man who speaks quickly, pleads, explains, offers too much, is dismissed. And here's the cruel symmetry. The less you say, the more they wonder. The more you say, the less they listen. Desperation makes your words cheap. Silence, on the other hand, makes your presence expensive. You must understand, silence is not absence. It is strategy. It is the art of creating distance where others spill themselves. It is the ability to make others lean in while you lean back. And in this lean back, you create mystery. Mystery is not decoration, it is leverage. Invisibility, when chosen, is a form of dominance. You remove yourself not to disappear, but to become untouchable. Most men cannot handle the tension of silence. They rush to fill the void with reassurances, jokes, stories, justifications. But those who can sit in the silence, who do not rush to prove, to defend, to explain, become dangerous. Because others cannot read them, and what you cannot read, you cannot control. The desperate man tries to win love, approval, mercy. The silent man doesn't try to win anything. He simply commands the room by withholding what others desperately seek: access, explanation, energy. Desperation is hunger on display. It's announcing to the world, I do not have enough, and in doing so, you attract scavengers, not allies. People don't give more to the man who asks more. They give to the man who doesn't ask at all, but makes them feel that giving to him increases their own worth. The psychology is brutal, but real. People are attracted to what they can't fully grasp. The moment you expose your entire hand, your needs, your insecurities, your longing, you become consumable, predictable, low value. In the mind of others, what is readily available is rarely valuable. That's why the overtexter gets ignored. The man who explains too much gets doubted. The one who waits, who doesn't chase, who disappears and reappears on his own time, that man controls the tempo, and he who controls tempo controls perception. Desperation is not just unattractive, it is repelling. It communicates that you are willing to lower your price just to stay in the market. And once you discount yourself, good luck raising your price again. Let's go deeper. Desperation doesn't just kill respect from others, it murders self-respect first. Because every time you act from need, you reinforce the belief that you are lacking, that you are unworthy unless received, unless responded to. And this belief becomes the root of your posture, your tone, your timing, even your silence. If born from insecurity and not sovereignty, will sound like noise. That's why you must train yourself to sit in the discomfort of not being chosen, not being replied to, not being validated, and remain unmoved. Power is not in speaking louder, it is in needing less. It is in watching someone drift away and not chasing, watching the opportunity evaporate and not panicking. Respect is born in that stillness. Because respect is not what you demand, it is what you command by refusing to collapse. In every room you walk into, you are broadcasting one of two things. Either I need something from you, or I have something you want. There is no in-between. The desperate man walks in with wide eyes, too many words, and a soul ready to trade. The respected man walks in with silence, gravity, and a refusal to perform. One is consumed, the other is studied, and the difference is not talent, it is control. Control over your emotions, your timing, your exposure. The man who has nothing left to prove and nothing urgent to win is the most feared figure in any dynamic, because no one knows what moves him. They cannot manipulate what they cannot predict, and this unpredictability becomes armor. You want power, stop being everywhere. You want respect, stop being accessible. You want control, stop explaining. Let them wonder. Let them ask questions you never answer. Let your silence echo louder than their shouting, because the man who speaks from sovereignty, who speaks when he chooses, not when provoked, creates a force field, and that force field is what they will call respect. But don't mistake it. It is not respect built from love. It is respect built from mystery, from minimal exposure, from quiet refusal to need. They start to panic when you stop explaining, when your silence no longer bends to their expectation, when the leash they thought they had tied around your reactions turns to smoke. This panic is not guilt. It is not love. It is not concern. It is fear, the fear that they can no longer influence your behavior. You see, the desperate man always explains himself. He apologizes too quickly. He clarifies too often. He lowers his voice when he should raise his standard. He becomes a narrator of his own weakness, begging to be understood, hoping that transparency will earn him forgiveness. But Machiavelli knew, in politics and in life, transparency is rarely a virtue. It is often a trap. The more they know, the easier you are to disarm. The more you reveal, the easier you are to dismantle. And so the wise man learns. Silence is not withdrawal. It is preemptive defense. You stay unreadable and therefore unconquerable. What they cannot label, they cannot attack. And that's the truth people choke on when you remove your emotional availability. They don't want you present, they want you predictable. They want access to your reactions so they can sculpt you into what fits their convenience. That's why they flinch when you stop answering texts immediately. That's why they bristle when you no longer volunteer your feelings on command. You've interrupted the system of control, and when you remove yourself from that system, they try to punish you. They say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're arrogant. But none of that is truth. It's a last-ditch effort to drag you back into the web. And the only antidote is to stand still, unapologetic, immovable. The desperate man breaks here. He defends, he appeases, he backpedals. But the sovereign man, he says nothing. He watches them flail in the vacuum his absence created. Do you understand now why Machiavelli warned about visibility? Why he taught that the prince must be feared more than loved, if he cannot be both? Because love is fickle. Love shifts with perception. But fear of your detachment, fear of your silence, that is what keeps power intact. Not fear through threats, not fear through violence, but the fear of your autonomy, your refusal to play the game. The desperation to pull you back in is not a compliment. It's proof that they were feeding off your need to be needed. They never saw you. They saw what they could extract from you. And now, faced with your absence, they reveal the truth. Without your desperation, they have no script to follow, and their confusion is your confirmation. You must start seeing desperation as a leak, a breach in your internal fortress. Every time you reach out impulsively, every time you explain something no one asked for, every time you try to be liked, you are bleeding power. Your energy is spilling into unworthy hands. Desperation creates debt, and the cruel irony, the more desperate you act, the more you feel owed. You begin to believe that others should now appreciate your openness, your vulnerability, your honesty. But they won't. They won't respect it. They'll use it, file it away, weaponize it later. Because in the real world, vulnerability without power is a liability. Only when you are already strong, already feared, already respected, only then can vulnerability be a choice, not a currency. And most men confuse the two. They sell their soul hoping to buy connection, but the connection built on desperation is counterfeit. It breaks the moment you stop performing. And so the Machiavellian path is not about being heartless. It is about being strategic with your heart. You don't give access to everyone. You don't explain yourself to those who haven't earned your truth. You don't plead for closure from the very hands that fractured you. You close the door yourself, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because true control means you do not require consensus to make a decision. You do not need applause to validate your silence. You do not wait to be dismissed. You exit on your own command. That is the posture that commands fear and respect alike. That is how kings are made in the shadows, long before they ever sit on a throne. You must be comfortable being misunderstood, because the desperate man wants to be liked. He fears being misread, so he over-explains, over-corrects, overcompensates. But every time you beg to be understood, you place your truth on trial, and there is nothing more pitiful than a man who must justify his own boundaries to those who never honored them to begin with. Learn this: silence is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of discipline. It is the rejection of theater. It is the quiet power of not needing to be validated in order to remain certain. People will call it arrogance. Let them. People will say you're difficult. Let them. It's not your job to be palatable to those who profited from your desperation. And here's what they fear most. Not your silence, but your indifference. Silence can be a tactic. Indifference is a transformation. When you no longer care to be understood, when you no longer feel the itch to react, when you truly do not need their validation, you become untouchable. You've removed their only weapon, your emotions. And without that, they stand exposed, unarmed, unable to move you. That is power, that is control, and that is why desperation is not just unattractive, it is fatal, because it reveals to the world that you are still tethered to their opinion, still dancing for scraps, still hoping they'll finally see you. Stop, turn your back, let them feel your absence, let them rage at your silence, let them beg for your words, and give them nothing, because in the silence, your worth multiplies. Not because you are playing hard to get, but because you are no longer playing at all. You have stepped out of the ring, and those still swinging will look foolish, shadowboxing with a ghost. Desperation traps you in the arena. You keep showing up to battles that were never meant to be fought. You explain to people committed to misunderstanding. You offer peace to those addicted to chaos. You lend time to hands that only take, and for what? To feel accepted, to feel seen. That is the lie you've been sold, that availability earns affection. It doesn't, it earns expectation. And the more available you are, the more others expect from you. And the more they expect, the more you must contort to meet it, until you are no longer a man, but a product, a tool, a convenience. That is the path of the desperate. But the path of the strategist. He is feared not for what he does, but for what he withholds. His presence is felt more in absence than in attendance. He chooses when to appear, and in this rare appearance, he commands the room not with volume, but with gravity. Because scarcity breeds value, and value once perceived becomes currency. When you are everywhere, your value dissolves into noise. But when you retreat, when you master invisibility, you become a myth, and myths are far more powerful than men. The desperate man hopes to be remembered by giving more. The sovereign man is remembered because he gave nothing that wasn't earned. And that difference between flooding and filtering is what separates the forgotten from the unforgettable. Control your exposure, and you control the story. When people know everything about you, they stop listening. When they know nothing, they start imagining. And imagination is always louder than fact. That's why a single mysterious silence can shake a kingdom more than 1,000 words. It creates space. Space for curiosity, space for doubt, space for fear. And in politics, in business, in life, those who make others doubt hold the leash. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, not just about the prince's actions, but the perception of those actions. For perception rules the world. If you appear desperate, you are desperate. If you appear in control, they will treat you as such. Even if inside you are burning. Because power is never about internal emotion, it is about external control. This is why discipline is your strongest ally. Not strength, not charm, not persuasion, discipline. The discipline to say nothing when your tongue itches to defend. The discipline to walk away when your heart screams to stay. The discipline to allow misunderstandings to live, because correcting them would cost you leverage. Most men react, few men restrain, and the man who restrains, who watches, who waits, who calculates, he is the one who wins in the end. Not because he is colder, but because he is clearer, clear enough to know that not every battle is worth fighting, not every insult needs a rebuttal, not every invitation to chaos must be accepted. The desperate man wants resolution, the disciplined man wants results. And results only come when your energy is consolidated, not scattered. Every reaction you give is energy spent. Every argument is a transaction. Every emotional outburst is a leak. And soon, you are bankrupt, not in money, but in presence. You walk into a room and no one turns. Not because you are invisible, but because you've become predictable. You've trained them to expect your desperation, to know your breaking point, to hear your defenses before the accusation. You've given away the blueprint to your destruction, and they will use it, not maliciously, but opportunistically, because most people don't even know they are feeding off your emotional compliance. It's instinct. They press, you respond, they push, you give. until one day you decide no more. That moment is your rebirth. When you say no and mean it. When you disappear and don't explain. When you stop trying to be the good one, the helpful one, the one who makes peace at his own expense. That is when the world starts recalibrating. Some will leave. Let them. Others will rage. Let them. A few will try to pull you back into the mold you shattered. Ignore them. Because now, you are not driven by desperation. You are driven by dignity. The man who acts from dignity never loses, even when he walks away, especially when he walks away, because walking away without desperation is the final move of mastery. It says, I am the prize, not the seeker, and that truth makes them remember you longer than anything you ever gave. So sit with your silence. Let it sharpen. Let it mold you. Let it choke out the parts of you still begging to be loved by those who never earned your vulnerability. This is the war within, the death of the desperate, the birth of the dangerous. You do not owe your story to those who mishandled your sentences. You do not owe your presence to the rooms that drained your power. You do not owe anything, not even closure, because closure is a favor, not a right, and favors are for the deserving, not the demanding. Learn this now and live it daily. Because once you master this rule of silence, once you reject the impulse to perform for your worth, you will see the world begin to adjust, not because it loves you, but because it fears losing access to the man who no longer needs it. And as they begin to adjust, you will see the truth, that their attention was never love. It was hunger, hunger for your compliance, hunger for your reactions, hunger for your presence, not because they valued it, but because they fed off it. Desperation is not just a scent, it's a feast for opportunists. And when you starve them, when you stop offering explanations, stop softening your tone, stop being available on command, they scatter, not because you wronged them, but because you stopped serving them. This is the moment most men relapse. They mistake the silence for loss, they see the space left behind, and believe they've done something wrong. But listen to me clearly, silence is not loss, it is filtration. Those who vanish were not your people, they were parasites clinging to your openness. Let them disappear, and in their absence, you will finally begin to see who respects your presence. Respect begins in the mirror. If you do not respect your own boundaries, no one else will. If you respond to every message, attend every argument, answer every demand, you are broadcasting that your time and peace are cheap. The man who respects himself does not explain his silence. He does not announce his withdrawal. He simply vanishes from the unworthy. That vanishing is not ghosting, it is governing. It is reclaiming your sovereignty over your time, your thoughts, your presence. Machiavelli understood this well. The prince who is too familiar loses awe. The leader who is too present becomes common, and what is common is controlled. That is why your absence must be earned, and when you return, let it be on your terms, not to be embraced, but to be observed, not to be welcomed, but to be measured, because the man who chooses his appearances creates myth, and myth is more powerful than memory. But here is where the challenge sharpens. The world will test your silence. It will provoke you, it will accuse you, it will whisper that you are being forgotten, unloved, irrelevant. This is the seduction of desperation in disguise. A voice that says, prove yourself, show them, be seen, be understood. And that is the trap. Because the moment you react, you collapse. You shatter the illusion you've built. You reduce your mystique to an emotion, and emotion, though real, is rarely respected in the battlefield of perception. The sovereign man does not react. He selects. He chooses which battles are worth his name, which invitations deserve his presence, which offenses even deserve acknowledgement. Most don't. Most are tests, and silence is the answer, not out of weakness, but out of superiority. There is a level of power so refined it cannot be explained, only felt. You walk into a room and people lower their voices. Not because you said something, but because you didn't. That's presence. That's what desperation destroys. Because desperation tries to fill every space, fix every misunderstanding, force every connection. It is loud, it is constant, it is predictable. But presence is the art of giving nothing and still being felt. It is the strength to endure being misjudged without correction. It is the dignity to know that your truth does not need approval to remain true. And this is where you must live now. In the quiet power of withholding, in the brutal calm of not needing to be chosen. Because the moment you stop chasing, the roles reverse. Suddenly they are the ones wondering, reaching, doubting. Your silence becomes their mirror. and most cannot bear what they see. Let the world talk. Let them speculate. Let them twist your silence into stories. Do not correct them. The desperate man cannot resist. He jumps in to clarify. He explains, defends, bends himself into 1,000 words hoping to shape their view. But every word digs his grave deeper. The sovereign man watches, unbothered, because he knows this. Reputation built on silence lasts longer than reputation built on defense. You become the man who doesn't flinch, the man who doesn't explain, and that becomes legend. They may not understand you, but they will remember you, and that is enough. Understanding fades, mystery endures. Even in relationships, especially there, this rule applies. The partner who is always available loses magnetism. The one who needs constant reassurance, who demands to be understood at every turn, becomes emotional furniture, present, functional, but never admired. But the partner who withholds slightly, who doesn't reveal everything, who knows when to retreat, that partner is dangerous, desired, respected. Not because they are manipulative, but because they are whole without you. And wholeness, when encountered, is either revered or resented, but never ignored. This is not about games, it is about gravity. When your world no longer tilts based on another's emotions, when your self-respect is no longer contingent on being loved, you become magnetic. And that magnetism only deepens in silence. So when you are tempted to respond, to reach out, to explain, stop. Ask yourself, what do I gain by being understood? If the answer is peace, then you're lying to yourself. Because peace that comes from external validation is not peace, it is permission, and permission can be revoked. True peace is internal. It is the decision to be unmoved in the storm of perception, and only the man who is unmoved can reshape how the world sees him. The desperate man wants to be seen. The sovereign man wants to be felt. And to be felt, you must first disappear, so that when you re-emerge, they realize how loud your silence actually was. And when they finally feel that silence, not just hear it, but feel it, it shakes them. Because it is no longer the silence of uncertainty, nor the silence of absence. It is the silence of sovereignty. The kind of silence that forces others to confront the weight of your presence only after it's gone. This is not emotional withdrawal. This is tactical erasure. You do not vanish because you are wounded. You vanish because you have ascended. You are no longer available for mediocrity, for misunderstanding, for manipulation disguised as care. And now the world panics, not because they miss you, but because they can no longer reach you. You have become unreachable, not through arrogance, but through elevation. You climbed too high for the noise to touch you, and they know it. Desperation is noise. Silence is signal. Every desperate action you used to take, texting first, defending your intentions, over-explaining your choices, it was noise. Static, begging to be seen. But signal, that's rare. Signal is when your absence carries meaning. When you say nothing and the world still hears you. When they can't find you but still talk about you, that's the shift. And once you've made it, you will never go back, because you will taste the power of self-containment. You will see how little needs to be said when your boundaries speak for you, when your actions scream in stillness, when your silence is no longer a void but a verdict. The people who mistook your kindness for compliance will feel it first. They will realize that your yes was never weak, it was generous, and now it is revoked. That's when the masks fall. Watch carefully. The ones who claim to love your presence will begin to resent your absence. Not because they truly care, but because they lost their grip. They were never attached to you. They were attached to their control over you. And now that you've broken the script, they don't know their lines. They will call you cold, distant, heartless. But understand, these are not insults. These are confessions. They are telling you exactly what they needed from your desperation. They needed you to be predictable, emotional, readable. Yours was not a relationship. It was a transaction. Your attention was their validation. Your reactivity, their power source. And when you unplug that, when you go quiet, they short-circuit. And you reboot. Machiavelli understood that power must sometimes be withdrawn to be respected. The ruler who is too generous invites insurrection. The leader who is too forgiving invites betrayal. Why? Because the predictable man is a map, and maps are used. But the sovereign man is a labyrinth. You enter, and you get lost. There is no easy route to his approval, no shortcut to his mind, no guarantee of his presence. And this uncertainty, it creates tension, and tension is power. They will think twice before crossing you, not because of what you might say, but because of what you might not. The threat of absence is more powerful than the promise of response. When your words no longer fly at every provocation, your silence becomes a weapon, and no one knows when or if you'll unsheath it. There's a quiet kind of terror in facing someone who doesn't need to be heard, who doesn't need to win, who doesn't need to be right. That is who you are becoming. You will notice it first in your posture. You won't lean in anymore. You won't rush to fill the silence. You'll simply sit back, let them speak, and in your stillness, they will hear the echo of their own desperation. They'll scramble to decode you, but you've left the cipher behind. That's what makes you dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you no longer explain your peace. You no longer argue your worth. You no longer trade your presence for attention. You show up when you choose. You speak when the silence has served its purpose. You leave when the room no longer deserves your presence. That is not detachment. That is control. This is the rebirth most never reach, because it demands a death, the death of your old self, the self that wanted to be liked, that chased validation, that feared being misunderstood, that explained itself into exhaustion. That man is gone, burned in the silence you chose, and what rose from those ashes? A sovereign, a strategist, a man who doesn't just act, he calculates, who doesn't just speak, he strikes, who doesn't just react, he rules. And now you no longer fear losing people, because anyone you can lose by being whole, by being calm, by being selective, was never yours to begin with. What you fear now is losing yourself again, and that fear will keep you disciplined, focused, unapologetically unavailable. Let the world think you've changed. Let them say you're hard to reach. Let them wonder why you don't show up the way you used to. That's the point. Your new presence is built on distance, on control, on the rule of silence. And the man who masters silence, he masters perception, he masters tension, he masters himself. And in mastering yourself, you inherit what desperation could never offer: dominion. Not over others, but over the one kingdom that truly matters, your inner world. Because in the end, all external power begins with internal discipline. That's what Machiavelli understood better than most. He knew that it is not the loudest man who commands, but the one who needs the least. The one who watches from the shadows while others perform. The one who listens more than he speaks, who observes without revealing, who waits until the perfect moment to act, and when he does so with precision, not impulse. Desperation acts, sovereignty decides, and every decision you now make from this place, calm, unbothered, calculated, rewrites the way the world sees you, not as a man who can be summoned, but as one whose presence must be earned. You'll notice it in the subtle ways first. Fewer people ask for your opinion because they're unsure what you'll say. Fewer people interrupt you because they're unsure if you'll speak again. You no longer fight for attention. Attention now finds you. And this reversal of gravity isn't accidental. It is the byproduct of your restraint. In a world starving for reactions, your stillness becomes status. Everyone else is speaking, shouting, explaining, crying out for understanding. And there you are, unmoved. Not out of coldness, out of clarity. Because you've learned that silence protects your peace, and peace sharpens your power. You do not react to the world anymore. You let the world adjust to you. And that shift, that psychological elevation, makes others second-guess their tone, their words, their assumptions. You become a mirror with no reflection, forcing them to see themselves without your feedback to distort it. This is the essence of high-level control. Not manipulation, not cruelty, but the withdrawal of unnecessary presence. When you step back, you see more. When you speak less, you hear more. And when you need less, you are offered more. People offer what you no longer ask for. Opportunities appear where you stop chasing. Respect deepens where words once diluted it. And most importantly, you gain back what desperation always costs you: your center, your sense of self, your ability to walk away without flinching. Your power now lies in your capacity to let go, to let the conversation end, to let the misunderstanding stand, to let the connection fade. Because you know that what is meant for you does not require your collapse. It does not need you to abandon your silence, your discipline, or your dignity. You are no longer the man who needs closure. You are the man who closes. You don't wait for apologies. You withdraw your energy. You don't beg for understanding. You build new rooms. You don't plead to be seen. You refine your vision. This is the final stage of transformation, not becoming something more, but shedding what was never truly you. The performative kindness, the exaggerated patience, the unnecessary transparency. Those were costumes stitched together by your past desperation. But now, you wear nothing but truth. And truth, when walked in consistently, becomes presence, and presence becomes legacy. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain your intentions. You don't even need to be visible every day. You just need to be felt when it matters. Let others talk about consistency. Let them chase algorithms, clout, and comfort. You are after something deeper, a state of being that doesn't bend, a rhythm of life that doesn't beg, a level of respect that doesn't require noise. You are building that now, brick by brick, in silence. And when they look back, when they finally notice the void you left behind, they will not say you vanished. They will say you ascended. And that is the difference between the man who is forgotten and the man who becomes folklore. You are no longer writing messages in desperation. You are writing myths in restraint. And those who knew you before will swear you became a ghost. But the truth is, you became something far more terrifying, untouchable. You have earned your detachment. You have paid for it in wounds, in humiliation, in the collapse of your old self. So don't cheapen it now. Do not return to the stage you burned. Do not seek applause from the crowd that once mocked your silence. Let them remember the last thing they saw, the back of a man walking away, unbothered, unreadable, unstoppable. That image will haunt them longer than any speech you could give. And that is how you win, not just the moment, but the memory. Because the man who speaks last is not the man who yells over others. It is the man who vanishes without warning, who lets the silence finish the conversation. That man is feared. That man is respected. That man is you. If you've stayed with me this long, it means something in you has already broken away from the need to be seen, the hunger to be understood, the instinct to perform. A part of you already knows, being respected will always cost more than being liked, and you're starting to understand that cost is worth it. Real power begins when you walk away without resentment, when you're silent not because you're weak, but because your energy is no longer for sale. So I ask you now, are you willing to let go of who you had to be to survive, just to become who you were meant to be? Are you ready to give up validation, attention, comfort, in exchange for self-command, for respect that doesn't vanish the moment you stop trying? If this message cut through the noise, if it stirred something you can't ignore, write in the comments, I choose silence. Let's see how many of us are done begging to be understood. Let's see who's ready to rule through restraint, not reaction. And when you're done, keep watching the next video. It'll take you further down this path than most people will ever dare to go. I'll meet you there.